This is Fjooken Enterprises YouTube channel, but let me be the first to say, welcome one and all, whether you be heroes or zeros, civilians, civilians or villains to my little slice of the internet. It might be one of the very small slices, but it's mine. Don't we have a wonderful show planned for you today? But before we get there, a little introduction. I am the titular Fajuk, or some people know me, the time traveler. I am a being who seeks knowledge in various forms and then shares it on this small corner of the web. Okay, okay. So we're back to talk more about Sir John A. Macdonald, if for no other reason than my mom enjoyed the first episode. So, as mentioned in the previous episode, this series is called Drunkards, Senators, and More, Past Canadian Prime Ministers. I am just a man, as mentioned in the intro, with a thirst for history knowledge, among other knowledge. You, on the other hand, my friend, have credentials. I know last episode you explained those, but I'm probably going to have you explain them every episode. So let's start with that.
So again, this is your sometimes co-host Anthony, and so my undergraduate degree is in political science with a concentration in Canadian political science from from Carleton University.
You know, I recently realized, and I didn't look it up because I have you. I don't know what the A stands for in Sir John A. Macdonald. Do you?
So this is the easiest question that you'll be asking me today, and that is the A stands for Alexander.
Or was he a sir when he first got elected, or did he become a sir?
No. So Sir John A. Macdonald was actually knighted when Canada confederated on July 1st, 1867, in recognition of his actions to bring about confederation.
This episode, as you know, because I sent you the questions, we have a theme. But before that, we get there. What was what we call British Columbia now, before it was a part of Canada?
So the current composition of the province of British Columbia is the amalgamation of two separate British colonies of the island of Vancouver and its dependencies, and the colony of British Columbia. There were also ceded and unceded territories belonging to First Nations that form British Columbia.
Oh. You're saying that we could have easily had 11 provinces if the island of Victoria joined separately?
It's a possibility. There have been many movements over the year to create new provinces from the current provinces.
In order to get to the good stuff, how did HBC's Rupert Land become the Northwest Territory of Manitoba?
So, what you referred to the HBC's Rupert Land was officially called Prince Rupert's Land, and the HBC was given a corporate monopoly by the United Kingdom. So there's that distinction where the United Kingdom gave them economic or corporate monopoly over the land, but didn't actually cede the territory to Hudson Bay. So between 1869 to 1870, the HBC surrendered its charter to the British Crown. And then by order in council that was dated the 23rd June of 1870, the British government admitted the territory to Canada to be effective on the 15th of July, 1870. So the land that's known as Rupert's Land is currently divided among 5 provinces and 1 territory. So Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Nunavut, and I guess technically the Northwest Territories were all can find their origins from this transaction.
Well, as the title indicates, this theme of this episode is Manitoba. But we can't really talk about Manitoba without discussing Louis Riel. So first off, who was he?
So Louis Riel was a Métis leader. He was a founding father of Manitoba, and he's a central figure in the Red River and the Northwest resistances. Riel was a leader, and he led two popular Métis governments, and was central in bringing Manitoba into Confederation. To get to the end of this, Riel ended up being executed for high treason for his role in the 1885 resistances to Canadian encroachment on Métis lands. Riel was originally dismissed historically as a rebel, but presently there's now new sympathies that now lie with Riel as a Métis leader who fought to protect his people from the Canadian government.
The Red River goes through Manitoba, so I assume the Red River Rebellion was the one that took place in Manitoba. What was the Red River Rebellion?
So, the Red River Colony was founded in 1812, and it was initially populated by Scottish settlers. After 1836, the colony was administered by the Hudson Bay Company. It was then mainly populated by Francophone and Anglophone Métis people.
Wait, hold up. Métis can be Anglophone?
The Métis can be Anglophone, Francophone, as long as it's about that historical connection between these early colonies and the Aboriginals. Okay. It depends again on the scholar that you're talking to.
Okay, back to the actual question.
Yep. So during the lengthy negotiations to transfer the sovereignty of the territory, so of the HBC territory to Canada, the Protestant settlers from the east moved into the colony, the Red River Colony. The Roman Catholic, so the Métis were Roman Catholics, and they wanted to ensure that they could preserve their religion, their French language, their land rights, and their culture. So the land transfer of Rupert's Land did not consider the people that were residing in the present territory. So they were an afterthought. They were they were living on a colony on the land. It was the land that was being transferred. Who was living there wasn't being taken into consideration. So in August 1869, the Métis' concerns were made worse. The Canadian government attempted to resurvey the settlements. Many Métis did not have clear titles to their land, so they didn't have an official document saying that this land was theirs. Ottawa intended to respect the Métis occupancy rights, but it gave no assurances that this would be the case. So therefore, the Métis feared the loss of their farms and their land that they'd been working and toiling on for at least a few generations. So this encouraged the rebels who had seized Upper Fort Garry. It was the main HBC trading post, and it's located at the fork of the Red and the Assiniboine rivers. They planned to hold it until the Canadian government agreed to negotiate. And in January 1870, Riel had gained the support of most of the Anglophones in the area. And I guess within the federal government. Although armed conflict persisted over the winter in 1870, and Riel seemed in control until the court-martialing and execution of a prisoner in March 1870. The individual that was executed was a man named Thomas Scott. He was one of the group of Ontario settlers who opposed the rebel government of Riel. And then on May 12th, 1870, a new small province called Manitoba was created by the Manitoba Act. Ottawa granted no amnesty for Louis Riel and his lieutenants. So they had to flee into exile just before the arrival of British and British/Canadian troops in the August of 1870.
Is Louis Riel responsible for forming Manitoba then, or did he just hinder the forming of Manitoba?
No, so he's noticed as a father of one of the founding fathers of Manitoba. And this is for the role that he did play and the enshrinement of the protections for the Métis people within the province of Manitoba.
So he was successful in getting those enshrined then?
Yes.
Okay.
But those that had caused the rebellion were still deemed to be enemies of the state.
We're not going to go into whether this next topic is good or bad for the people that it happened to. But was the Red River Rebellion responsible for residential schools?
I would argue that it wasn't. It could have been a consideration. But Canada's Indian residential schools were introduced by Sir John A. Macdonald as a nationwide program of assimilation in 1883. So there's about a little more than a decade after the rebellions, these schools are implemented.
You said this was a project of assimilation. Doesn't that go against what Canada currently stands for as being a melting pot?
Yes, very much so. Right now, we like to deem ourselves as a multicultural society that accepts all. Canada has a spotty history at past with multiculturalism. We've had head taxes on Chinese to ensure that they would not, so that if they did come over to Canada, that they would have to pay to bring themselves over and to try to make themselves a citizen. You had boats of refugees during the Second World War that were of Jewish descent that were turned away. Canada has a very spotty record with immigration, and the Canadian government has had to apologize on numerous occasions for their treatment of certain peoples.
Why did Sir John A. think that the natives needed to be assimilated?
So, I'm going to quote Sir John A. Macdonald as he was recorded in the House of Commons. When the school is on the reserve, the child lives with his parents who are savages. He is surrounded by savages. He is simply a savage who can read and write.
We're not going to get into the politics of how natives are treated, but is how natives and First Nations and Métis treated today due to basically Sir John A. Macdonald's treatment of them?
So that's a loaded question, and we can state that the legacy of our mistreatment of the First Nations in Canada stems from our common British approach, imperialistic approach. Macdonald was a product of his time and has been seen as draconian by his contemporaries, and he can be blamed for many of the mistreatments during his time in power, as he basically had Indigenous people locked down so tightly that they became irrelevant politically after the year 1885.
Okay. Well, before we go, do you have another quick, interesting tidbit about our first Prime Minister, the drunkard?
So, during the final negotiations of Confederation at the London Conference in December of 1866, Sir John A. Macdonald nearly died when he fell asleep with a candle still burning in his bedroom at the Westminster Palace Hotel. By various historical accounts, they say that he woke up to the smell of his own charred flesh and that he was so badly burned by the flames, but he kept it secret through the final negotiations.
That is definitely an interesting tidbit. And as always, those listening, please comment, and we'll see you. Well, you'll hear us in the next podcast.
Goodbye.